Yes, the fact that Farhan Zaidi only has 1 year left on his contract and he's under a lot of pressure could certainly affect the Giants' managerial search.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since way back in 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts, including YouTube. Check us out there. Please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. And coming up on today's show, it's a mailbag edition. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted questions. As usual, we have way more than I'll be able to get to today. But let's just jump right in. The first question coming from Thomas, who says, how much pause would a managerial candidate have coming in knowing Zaidi might only have 1 year left before being dismissed himself? So this is a key question. This was a question that was asked by some reporters, maybe one, whatever, but during his press conference he did a couple days ago. And his response, Farhan Zaidi's response, was basically that he didn't think it would be a major deterrent because I believe the main reason he gave is that perhaps he's had some relationships with some of these candidates. And so there would be an ability to communicate the situation well and a trust. You're not just totally walking into an unknown situation. That being said, and then he did say even for those who maybe he hasn't worked with in the past, that this opening, based on the volume of incoming inquiries and calls he's received about the managerial opening here, indicates to him that it's not going to be a major deterrent. However, I think that it is. It potentially is. And there's a couple ways around this. Number one, and this is probably going to be the least popular thing I say all day. Number one is, it depends on who you sign as a manager. Perhaps you just sign someone to a 1 year deal, and then it's you're both on a 1 year deal. But that would depend on the, quality of the manager. Certain managers would command longer than a 1 year deal. Certain managers would command a 1 year deal. And so maybe they target someone who's more of a 1 year deal kind of guy. And then see where things are at the end of the year. But the other thing that they could do is that they could extend Farhan Zaidi. That's the thing I was saying would be the most unpopular thing perhaps I say all day, is that you could give, you could sign a manager to say a 3 year deal and also give Farhan Zaidi a 2 year extension on top of the 1 year he's already under contract. Now, the downside of that is, this next question is actually, why don't I just jump right into it? Because I feel like I kind of already answered this. I think, yes, it's possibly a problem, although there aren't a lot of, I don't really see a lot of candidates who are gonna for sure command long-term deals that really makes sense for the Giants. They probably could get almost all of the guys that, I don't know what the typical, what Gabe Kapler's original contract was. Was it 2 years? I think 3 years is kind of typical. And so, yeah, if your president of baseball operations is only under a 1 year contract and he's on the hot seat, then it could definitely play a role. And so it's something to monitor. But Zaidi has said, and I don't know that we should just take his word for it, that he doesn't anticipate it being an issue. But Mia asks, do you think Farhan Zaidi should be let go if the Giants miss the playoffs in 2024? It depends. If they give him an extension prior to the season, then There is a value in stability. At the same time, if they miss the playoffs again in 2024, you're looking at like a pretty significant failure of his duties, and 6 years of getting to remake this organization, and the bar is kind of low to make the postseason right now with the expanded, now 12 teams getting in. You only needed really 84 wins. And so if you can't make an 84 win team in your 6th year as president of baseball operations, then, my inclination is to answer this question by saying, yes, I do think he should be probably let go if they miss the playoffs in 2024. And that does complicate the managerial thing that we just talked about. So it's complicated. And that's why the answer is yes to the first question. Roroni Mod asks, what does a package for Juan Soto look like? Will the assumption that there's no chance to extend him because he's a Scott Boras client keep the trade costs down? Which prospects would you keep off the table in a trade? So Juan Soto will be entering the final year of arbitration. So this is his last year coming up before he will hit the free agent market at a ridiculously young age of like 25 or 26, I forget which, but one of those. And yes, the fact that he already rejected a $450 million contract. And I think if anything, his value has gone down since then because he's continued to be a great hitter, but he's had 2 consecutive seasons of being really like a liability defensively. And so I don't know that I see him getting $450 million. Maybe if it's spread out over like 16 years, which you might see given his age, to be honest. That's kind of the trend that we've seen. And being in your legitimate mid-20s is rare for a star player. It's because they came up when they were like teenagers because they were so good. So like Bryce Harper was one example. Anyway, what would a Soto trade package look like? Well, obviously the Padres would want to recoup some value. They gave up quite a bit to get him, and there's definitely a chance that they just decide to hold on to him, but they've said that they want to reduce their payroll down to, what did they say, closer to 200 million from 250 this year. And so they've got some expiring contracts. So I don't know exactly where they stand right now. And then you factor in arbitration and all that. But basically, 1 year of Juan Soto is a lot less valuable than 2.5 years of Juan Soto, which is what the Padres paid at the time when they got him. And so what prospects would I keep off the table? Like, there's no way I'm dealing Kyle Harrison or even probably Marco Luciano or Luis Matos for 1 year of Juan Soto, knowing, like, I agree with your assumption that there's no chance of an extension. That's just, you're giving up a lot of potential. Let me just leave it at that word. A lot of potential with some guys who are highly regarded prospects there for 1 year of a player, and a player who has shown some real regression defensively. So, I just look back to the Mookie Betts trade. It's a similar circumstance, except Betts seemed to be amenable to an extension, which he got with the Dodgers. But, what did they give up? Really, the headliner was Alex Verdugo, who was like, a solid player already on the Major League roster. And so it's like it's not quite the same, but like a Mike Yastrzemski, if he was younger, maybe, with a few years. Actually, Verdugo had a lot of years of team control. There's not maybe like a Tyro Estrada as the headliner, but I don't think I would do even that, to be honest. Just, it matters so much that it's only 1 year, and that with Betts, it was different because the Dodgers seemed to believe that they would be able to extend him, and they did. And so there was also money moved in that deal with David Price. The Dodgers took on half of his remaining contract. Also, a top 50 prospect or so, Jeter Downs, went in that deal, and then another kind of throw in Connor Wong. And so it just didn't ultimately cost that much for 1 year of Mookie Betts. And people were like shocked, but that's just the reality of 1 year of a player. The trade is, the value is not extremely high. It's still pretty high, but it's not extremely high. So coming up in just a minute, we are going to get into more questions and answers, including platoons. Would the Giants have been better off giving regular playing time to these guys instead of platooning them in 2023? I'm going to give a detailed answer in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode is brought to you by Ibotta. Believe it or not, the holidays are around the corner. They're nearing, getting closer every day. It doesn't feel like it today when it's like 90 degrees out, but soon enough, the holidays will be here, which means you might have a long list of gifts that you need to buy. Don't just spend money on everyone else without getting anything in return. Use Ibotta and start getting cash back today. The average Ibotta user earns $100 a year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, or you could use your cash back to buy that flight that you've been eyeing, the game you're dying to go to, or the fancy dinner that you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, you get real cash back that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. You can earn cash back on hundreds of online brands and retailers too when you start with Ibotta, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Download the Ibotta app now and use code MLB to start earning real cash back. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and use code MLB. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code MLB. All right, as promised, more questions and answers. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Coming up, everydayers on Monday, we will be back. We will be back, and hopefully some juicy rumors come out over the weekend. I would anticipate that some will. Like we'll start to hear about people the Giants perhaps interviewed internally, because we heard that was going to happen this week. So come back on Monday for the latest. There's always the latest, and we provide it every day. So, getting back to the questions, the next one comes from Brian, who says, with regular playing time as opposed to platooning, would the 2023 team have been more successful? It seems to me that routine and regularity make people better at things. I don't think Conforto and Haniger having the worst years of their careers is a coincidence. So, I disagree, and one of the first things that comes to mind here is that they did not just put Conforto and Haniger into platoons in the beginning. Haniger, when he was, he missed the start of the season with the oblique that turned into a back thing, and then he finally came back around the Mexico City series. They completely did not sign Haniger to be a platoon player, and his career platoon splits very much back that up. I think coming into the year, he had historically been about 20% above the league average overall when facing right-handed pitching, and left-handed pitching even better than that. And so definitely not a guy they brought in to be a platoon player. And with Conforto, I think it was kind of more of a possibility, but Conforto certainly had his chances against left-handed pitching a lot. And so with Haniger, yes, he missed some time to start the year, and then he played a lot. He was playing every day. He was not being platooned. He only started kind of getting platooned in the very end of the season. And I think that was because he was stinking up the joint. He was terrible all season, basically. All due respect, I was obviously rooting for the guy, but he would be the first to tell you he had a miserable season. And they were fighting for their season. And at that point, they're desperate, and they're just this guy's been horrible. We've got to try something else. And, maybe just only letting him face lefties right now is the best move. And that's kind of what they did in September, and really even like in the second half of September. That's the way that I remember it. And he was not brought in to be a platoon player. And again, Conforto, he's got a track record of platoon splits where he's a monster historically, wasn't really this year, against right-handed pitching. And historically, he's been a little below average against left-handed pitching. And so the idea that, would he, I don't think that he was even just like strictly platooned. I think more so than Haniger, there was a little bit of that. But he kind of played his way into it. That's the thing, is a lot, like if you watched all 162 games, these guys like played their way into platoons. It wasn't that they were just platooned and therefore they had bad years. Not at all. Like they were given tons of opportunities and they just failed time and 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 time again. And at that point, like especially when your season's crumbling, if you're running a team, you've got to think like, well, how can we stop the bleeding here? And part of that was like, well, these guys are like, look at their numbers against Conforto against left-handed pitching. And I believe, I haven't checked on it in a minute, but I want to say Conforto's numbers this year against left-handed pitching were pretty miserable. And so, and like Jock Peterson, would he have been better if he had just played every day? No, I don't think so. He's had some opportunities to do so. He himself says that he wants to be platooned, or like he believes in being platooned, and that he's made a career out of it. So that's the thing, is like platoon players get platooned. Would the Giants be better off if they had fewer platoon players? Yes. That's a different question, though. And in regards to Haniger and Conforto, I just don't think this applies, because that wasn't the plan. They played their way into it. It was not what started out originally. But like Tyro, not platooned. JD Davis, for the most part, wasn't platooned until he started to really struggle. Then you saw a little bit less of him in the lineup every day. Yastrzemski, at times, not platooned. They did platoon a lot. Like Patrick Bailey, he wasn't platooned, but he rested a lot as a catcher. But I think the answer is fewer platoon players. It's not more exposure to same-handed pitching for players with track records of being bad against same-handed pitching, if that makes any sense. Next question comes from Brian, who says, assuming Conforto opts out, oh gosh, this is a tough question. Yastrzemski, Slater, Haniger, Matos, Flores, Fitzgerald / Casey, Wade, Estrada, Luciano, Davis, Bailey, and Sable or Bart, leaves 0 or 1 spot. So I counted 12 there, because Fitzgerald / Casey I gave 1 spot, and Sable or Bart I gave 1 spot as opposed to 2 for each. But your question is then, who gets traded / sent down / released if we make a big splash or 2? So yeah, they cannot really just roll back with the same team. I've become skeptical about like big splashes and all that, but basically you look at guys who has options, and you look at who are non-tender candidates. I'm not sure that anyone gets non-tendered. If there's a candidate, it could be JD Davis. He's due for, like roughly, I think, $7 million or so through arbitration. And maybe there's a case to make. You just move on there. I think at the very least you could tender him a contract and then trade him. And that's kind of your question. So like, I think Davis could be expendable, although I do see value if you're going to stick at first base with like a Wade / somebody platoon. You could have JD Davis on the other side there. And then you kind of have like full-time DH role open for Wilmer Flores. Although if you go out and sign a Shohei Ohtani, then maybe not. Obviously a long shot there, but so again, who are the guys who have options? I'm not sure Matos just like automatically gets a spot on the opening day roster. And this is one of those things where we make so much of a big deal about who's on the opening day roster, and then it changes constantly. And so, Matos just doesn't have to begin the year on the season. And so that's a potential spot there. And then Fitzgerald doesn't have to begin the year in the majors. Neither does Casey Schmidt. And so, you could clear space by just sending these guys to the minors. That's what the benefit of minor league options is. But the downside is then you don't have the young players. And so you got to strike a balance between, do we want to give opportunities to these young players, or do we want to go with someone more established? And like, if they do end up landing a higher impact player, then I think you make that exchange. Like, so like if you get Matt Chapman or something, then maybe Casey Schmidt is more of a depth piece in AAA as opposed to on the major league opening day roster. Luciano, I think, sticks because Farhan Zaidi said that they want to give him the chance to be the opening day shortstop. You're not going to have Sable and Bart. I don't think 3 catchers would be kind of wild, especially considering the crunch you're discussing. And Bart is out of minor league options. And so either he's the guy who makes it because of that fact, or he gets traded because of that fact. But that doesn't open up a spot on the major league roster because you still need a backup catcher. And in that case, it would just be like what it was this year, Bailey and Sable. So there's flexibility here with a lot of guys having options is basically what I'm saying. And then potentially, like, you could trade anyone. You could trade any of these guys. So it's hard for me to get too specific. Next question is going to be coming from Lane, asking about trading pitchers, because that is something that seems realistic. And Farhan Zaidi was literally asked about it, and he basically said, yeah, we're super open to that because they have a lot of young pitching depth and talent. Not just depth, but think of Tristan Beck and Keaton Winn, and there's a whole other wave coming. Kyle Harrison, Tristan Beck, Keaton Winn, and a whole other wave coming. So we'll get into that question and about the managerial search a little bit more, and the coaching staff that will result from that managerial search. So all of that in just a minute. And before we get into it, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. I'm looking right now at the 49ers' upcoming game against the Dallas Cowboys at home in Santa Clara. 49ers are favorites. I don't really know much about... I know the 49ers are good. I know that we looked just last time and they were co-favorites along with the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl, which you can also check out at FanDuel. But in this game, 49ers are favorites at -184 outright to win. And the spread is -3.5 for the Niners at -110 odds. The over-under is set at 45. So that's one of many things you can check out, including MLB action over at FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, here we go. More questions and answers. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Every day is on Monday. The latest, the juiciest. This managerial thing is good for business for me, and I hope that you enjoy it. It's not just business for me; it's entertainment for you, which is what it's really all about. So I anticipate we'll hear some rumblings about something related to the Giants and their managerial search over the weekend, and I can't wait to bring you that on Monday. Okay, the next question. Where were we? Next question is from Lane, who says, aside from Webb and Cobb, which of Harrison, DeSclafani, Wynn, Beck, Black, Birdsong, Seymour, Tang, Murphy, and Wisenhunt is traded, along with their seeming desire to add a top starter like Yamamoto. And so, yeah, this is where the rubber meets the road, is that this is kind of realistic, I think, in a way, given all the depth you mentioned and some guys you didn't even mention. Like, at first when I read this and you said Black, I read it as Beck, but both of them apply. Mason Black and Tristan Beck. And, Farhan Zaidi, he named some people by name when he did this post-mortem kind of press conference where I had it somewhere. Did I erase it? I think I may have erased it. But he called out a bunch of names that were the next line of potential. Oh, here we have it. Mason Black, Carson Wisenhunt, Hayden Birdsong, and Landon Roop. And in addition to Keaton Wynn and Tristan Beck, and let's see, who else did you mention? Basically, they've got pitching coming out their ears. Sean Jelly and Kai-Wei Tang. DeSclafani doesn't have any trade value. Kyle Harrison, I don't think that they trade. So I would say it's like the Keaton Wynn, Tristan Beck, those two guys like showed enough, I think, at the major league level where there's going to be legitimate interest from teams that are in need of young pitching. Like, those guys are interesting, and Carson Wisenhunt is no exception, and then all the guys Farhan Zaidi mentioned. So what's your question? Which of them is traded? I don't know. I think you just kind of dangle them all and see the best return you're able to get. And I think the goal would be, with so much pitching depth and the free agent market loaded with really good pitchers, including Yamamoto out of, I believe, Japan, but also a bunch of MLB pitchers as well, then you sign somebody and then your depth gets even more deep, and then you're able to trade from that depth and get some everyday position players, not platoon players, but like young, talented, everyday players. I'm thinking of the Cincinnati Reds as a good fit right away. They need pitching. The Cardinals, they need pitching, and they've got position player talent. Tommy Edman was someone I really liked, and they've got younger talent as well, even than Edman. So there's a lot of when I say the Reds, they actually have some really good young pitching. So maybe they don't. I don't know. I'd have to dig into it more, but this is a real legitimate possibility of something we could see this offseason. Next question. J.R. Nelson, now that the Giants are getting a new manager, do you think that firing Kapler will benefit or hurt the team's chances in 2024? Will a change in direction improve the team, or will there be some growing pains? I'm generally an optimistic guy. I think that it will benefit them as opposed to hurt them. And part of that is I think they're highly motivated to improve the roster. And now, am I promising anything? Am I promising big splashes? I'm absolutely not. But at the same time, I think they feel probably like they need to get this right with the pick of their manager and with improving the roster. And so I don't see this hurting them in any way. Next question from M Triolo. With Farhan going into his last year and on the hot seat, should we expect big things this offseason and at the winter meetings? This is my new operating line. Never expect big things, because I have expected them for a few years in a row now, and it just hasn't happened. Even though they've tried, it hasn't happened. And so I just would set the bar low with expectations, hope for the best, but expect the worst. Next question from Beast Boy 904. Do you think the Giants can roll out a palatable manager? By that, I mean both old and new fans of the sport like. If so, who do you think the people that fit the Giants' agenda will be? So that's the goal. Like they really, that's what they're trying to do, I think. And also, of course, someone that the players like and respect, and someone who works adequately with the front office. I don't think you can go too far to the extreme of someone who's just going to butt heads with the front office, but also I don't think they want to go too far to the extreme of a Gabe Kapler, maybe someone who's too similar to the front office. So that is the balance they need to strike. The guy I mentioned was Stephen Vogt. I think he and Pat Burrell and Craig Counsell, if he's not brought back by the Brewers, but I would expect him to go to the Mets if that's the case. Those are just a few names. Buster Posey, if he wanted to do it, but I really don't think he does. So Donnie Ecker, potentially. I'm not sure. Ecker, I think the old school fans would appreciate Ecker because I think they give him, they're like, hey, you let this hitting coach go when he made them so good in 2021. And I think you can make an argument for that would resonate with anyone. But Vogt and Burrell, like these guys kind of put people at ease. And I think like Vogt is just kind of universally respected by young and old. And so that's my thoughts on that. Last question from Mike. What will happen to the 2023 coaching staff now that Kapler is gone? How many could stay on? And do you think they'll have as many coaches under a new manager? First thought is I don't think they'll have as many coaches. It's been like a topic of almost, they've been almost like made fun of for the size of their coaching staff. And I think it was kind of a Gabe Kapler thing. And so I would anticipate probably a smaller coaching staff under a new manager. I think some could stay, but I also think you'll probably see a lot not stay. A new manager has a right to kind of pick their guys. And I think you'll see a lot of turnover. And you're seeing already guys like Craig Albernaz, the bullpen and catching coach, reportedly being considered a candidate for the Cleveland Guardians managerial job and potentially a candidate for the Giants managerial job. So, yeah, I think you'll see a lot of turnover. Justin Veely, like the hitting coaches, may very well be on the hot seat and on the way out. Andrew Bailey seems like an asset on the pitching side, and he could stick around, though we've already seen departures of key people on the pitching side like Brian Bannister. So, like I said, it's going to be a juicy month and offseason for the Giants, definitely regardless of what happens in free agency because of this managerial opening and all the ramifications that come from it. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day, everydayers. On Monday, the latest and the greatest. So come back for that. It's always a good time. So once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out so much. So thank you in advance. And thanks to everyone who's done so already. I cannot wait to be with you again on Monday. Have a great weekend. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.